The history of desert racing. What inspired today's tumultuous Baja 1000 and Nora 1000 races through the desert? Competition between man and machine, just to see if you can finish.
A juicy little story I handpicked out of the April 1962 issue of Cycle World magazine about a tale of two men.
Honda's campaign stunt to sell motorcycles. A stunt where they paid two riders to race from La Paz to Ensenada. This is a story of Bill Robertson Jr. and holy shit. Well, there's them, but then there's Bud and Dave Egan's who were brothers. Dave and Bill. Dave Egan's. Okay, this is the story of Dave and Bill.
The year's 1962.
And this is in a time period when Americans didn't really appreciate foreign okay, let's be honest. They like things from Europe, they don't like things from Japan, because Japan did a little something 20 years earlier. So everybody wants to support American-made manufacturing. And back when things were made to be worked on and to last, 60,000 miles wasn't considered, wow, that's a long. Nowadays, when you pop the hood, it's just plastic and intimidation. So manufacturers don't want you to learn how to work on your shit. So here we are. Honda needs to make a name for itself. They need to find a way to connect with their market. Walt Fulton and Jack McCormick were emerging sales manager on a bold mission to redefine the perception of Honda motorcycles and the remarkable capabilities of their newest, latest and greatest CL72 Scrambler. Initially, they enlisted the help of Bud Eakins, a famous Southern California stuntman that you might recognize from one of my favorite movies, The Great Escape. Literally the reason I like motorcycles. And Terminator 2. Check it out. Steve McQueen's the man.
Bud pitched a timed ride down the entire Baja Peninsula on Honda's brand new CL72 Scrambler. He convinced AMH's Jack McCormick and Walt Fulton, despite Japanese headquarters doubts, to back the first ever record attempt.
Originally, the plan was for Bud and Dave Eakins to ride the length of the peninsula. They would have a plane follow them, a Cessna, while Walt Fulton, the sales manager, provided aerial cover. But then Triumph Motorcycle seller, the person who sells the motorcycles, reached in and said, hey, we can't have Bud Eakins be racing because he's like one of our number one guys. He sells tons of Triumphs and we cannot have him affiliated with increasing sales for Honda, so he's out. McCormick, the other sales manager, proposed that he have one of his buddies, owners Bill Robertson Sr. and Jr., owners of Honda Hollywood, a significant retail outlet in the heart of the movie industry. So Bill Robertson Sr., with his extensive experience flying fishing trips down Baja, flies with Fulton to follow the two racers as an aerial chase team. And meanwhile, Bill Jr., at 24 years old, yes, that's 24 years old, would accompany him the entire length of the Baja Peninsula. Refreshing. In 1962, Baja was not what it is today. There were not paved roads. You didn't have GPS, you didn't have Garmin, you didn't have any of that. The most recent maps of the region dated back to 1933. That's all they had to work with. And lots of old, dusty trails that donkeys and other farmers and locals used to go down. They literally had to navigate by the stars. That is, they alluded to that in the magazine article. Jesuit missionaries. Did I say Mormons? It's the Jesuits. Remember, they're doing all of this. They're risking their lives. They're going through the desert to try to set a record. And so I'm assuming they had like a canteen strapped to their hip. All this just because some sales managers are like, oh, hey, go prove our CL72 Scrambler can hold its own. Honda felt it imperative to document this entire journey. So not only did they have the chase plane with Bill Robertson Sr. and Fulton, they also had invited a Cycle World journalist and a prior World War II aviator by the name of John McLaughlin, who were confident to navigate the area. Now, again, they're doing this with analog controls and all that stuff inside the aircraft, the avionics. No modern GPSs or anything like that. Plus Mexican flying restrictions, which said they could only fly when it was light out. So that was just an added layer of challenge to the expedition. Well, they chased down these two motorcycles. Conclude 39 hours and 56 minutes later. That would be over 60 hours for Eakins and Robertson Jr. without sleep. Summer shady. Logistics is a big deal in any race, let alone a desert race. If you've seen any of the 1,000 or 500 mile Baja races out here, nowadays, even in the past 10, 20 years, you have chase copters, you have chase teams, you have chase trucks, you have the pre-runner that goes out first, then you have the trophy truck or the UTV, where the Ironman class guy has some guy chasing him with a pickup truck with some spare, sandwiches and all this, that, and the other, and they got the radios and the medic teams, and you got fans on the sidelines. But back then, there was nothing. Nobody knew to anticipate their arrival other than the two aircraft. So planning this whole endeavor was a pain in the ass, and then getting access to gas was a whole nother debacle. The nearest gas station was the Pemex, 65 miles into the journey, right outside Ensenada.
Hey guys, it's your boy. Sorry for the intermission here. I went above and beyond and I found a 1962 Auto Club road map of Baja, California and Ensenada with all these details in here. Who would do that? I would do that with all these super juicy deets for your viewing pleasure. So we can see Santo Tomas, we can see Highway 1, and a whole bunch of other stuff you can see stuffed in there. It's kind of a Where's Waldo. Anyways, back.
That was a daunting task, and take into account the gas tank and the gas tank. This beer's kicking in, boys. The gas tank size, which is about 2.5 gallons, and the capabilities of just a regular internal combustion motorcycle with a carburetor. A regular internal combustion motorcycle, right? Pinning it, they could deplete their gas tank in about 50 miles. If they went half throttle, they could stretch that out to about 80 miles. So they got a 1 gallon gas jug mounted inside of a cargo bag and wrap that around the gas tank. Now, like any good desert racer knows, prior to the big day, you got to do a pre-run. What's the purpose of a pre-run? Well, you run prior to the actual race so you have an idea of what challenges and obstacles to anticipate, what the course looks like, and notes that you and your co-pilot or fellow racer, team member, need to make for yourself for the big day. This is pretty standard in Dakar and Baja, the desert racing of Arizona, Nevada, and Southern California. All those 100-mile, 1,000-mile races, you go out, you do yourself a pre-run. Typically, the pre-run is done in a separate vehicle that's not the actual race vehicle. You want to preserve the integrity, the capability, and the condition of the race vehicle for a race day. You choose to do the pre-run with something else. In this case, they did it in their plane.
The pre-run.
All right, what made this trip interesting was in the Cessna, doing the pre-run, they had to stop about every 80 miles and figure out their sandwich, snacky, and fuel stops. Luckily, about every 80 miles or so, give or take, was a ranch with some oil drums, which is funny because in the story they just say there was a ranch, but obviously those are people's property. So I don't know, they had a chorus, a family member or a local villager like, hey, can we land a plane on this side of your ranch? We see there's some old drums. Can we fill those with fuel, or can we bring our own drums and fill those with fuel and then stash a sandwich? Not a lot of context there, but like most parts of the world, you can get by with a smile, give respect, you get respect. Mexican people are very hospitable to this new concept of desert racing. It's also interesting is they had to siphon the fuel out of the drums into the motorcycles. Now, getting 2.5 gallons siphoned into a motorcycle, not a big deal. When it comes to aircraft, that's a little bit different. If you don't know, most aircraft store their fuel in their wings. The liquid fuel goes in the wings. You gotta climb on top of the wings to fuel up each wing, left and right individually. So they had to figure out hoses and, a little suck and blow method to get the stuff in there. 1 gallon glass wine bottles. Not a big deal when it came to the bikes, but 1 gallon at a time into a Cessna, which, if you look up aircraft, it's like the Sportster of aircraft, small single engine plane. Doesn't drink too much, but if you're flying around all day, it'll get thirsty. And if you're flying into a headwind, you're going to use more fuel. 40 gallons, 1 gallon at a time out of a wine bottle. That's rough stuff. Another purpose and reason for the pre-run was to determine which path was better. The more traveled, well-known Gulf side with its established route, or traverse through the desert and the unknown path. See if they could take a shortcut, because going through the desert from La Paz to Ensenada, vice versa, Ensenada to La Paz, would actually be quicker if they cut through the peninsula. But if they take the Gulf side, cut over and then come down the Gulf, that was the more traveled path, that was the more established route. They chose the less traveled Pacific route, even though today you think of the Pacific route as pretty standard. I've seen tons of pre-runners and Ironman class and UTVs and VW bugs go down the Pacific. But back then, uncharted territory, my friend.
Day one.
Decision was made to embark on the third Saturday of March, 1962 at midnight, after both riders had driven 3 hours down to San Diego after a full day's work. This was later regarded as a mistake. And furthermore, they anticipated that navigating the highway from Tijuana down to Ensenada wasn't going to be a problem. But back then, the highway was a little bit different and a little harder to see and not as well established or taken care of. Nor was the stretch to the morning meeting point in San Quentin. And again, this is just the beginning of the trip. They're driving through the dark. They gas up at the end of the pavement in Santo Tomas and traverse, sandy, silty desert beds and all the different types of terrain, rocky and rough and skimming over high spots, ruts everywhere. What they didn't expect was as dawn broke to their left, the sun was just barely rising. There was a wire stretched across the road, leading to a low-speed crash. Thankfully, neither of them suffered major injuries, but they did mess up their rear fender pretty good. And yes, my brain is thinking of the counselor. Bill's bike had suffered the most damage. So they stay on track. They travel another 42 hours for their predetermined 32 hours. As they approach the Cessna, Deakins can tell the back of Bill's fender is real jacked up. He can see it flapping and wobbling and this, that, and the other, and it's all cracked. They both decide, along with their chase crew, to just remove off the fender entirely. But the weird part is they had enough parts in the plane and tools to repair it perfectly, but they decided to just say, to hell with it and to take it off completely. This will come important later and be regarded as a really big mistake. Both bikes had lost their taillight lenses, and what's important about that is that Bill would have to continue another 700 miles without a rear fender. So, for context, for those of you who don't ride dirt bikes, have you ever ridden a bicycle through the rain or through a puddle and you get a giant biker stripe up the back of your shirt? That's because it kicks up water and debris and all that stuff, right? So that's all, the whole fucking point of a fender is to keep the rocks and debris and sand not only off your person, off of other components on the bike that the fender protects. If you look at a dirt bike, they usually have a little rubber flap where the fender ends, and then there's some more there. Almost 99.999% of dirt bikes have an air box there foreshadowing. Now, this is where the part of the story gets kind of weird. They had an unexpected rendezvous on Chapala Lake. Oh, I said that right, Chapala Lake, where John McLaughlin, that World War II aviator I had mentioned, brought in some people from the press so they could do a little photo shoot. That's where we get this photo. They're asking the riders questions, taking interviews. They end up having a good old time. There's 5 adobe houses with chickens and kids and some farmers. Eakins and Bud Jr. or Bill Jr. end up chasing chickens around and all that stuff, burning up some time, enjoying themselves. I'm surprised they're not delirious from sleep deprivation. But anyways, this is later regarded as a mistake too, because they're trying to set a time record and they're doofing off with reporters and kids and chickens.
Day 2.
The next meetup spot was the El Arco station at the 28th parallel, which also delineates the difference between Pacific time and Mountain time. This is something they did not anticipate.
Guys, don't listen to me here. I literally don't know what I'm talking about. The weather was good.
The only well or water source is situated downstream from the town's outhouse. So let that sink in. And at this town of El Arco, Walt and Bill Sr., the original chase crew, not the journalist chase plane, are waiting there as long as they can. Waiting and waiting and waiting. Starting to get dark out. They need to touch down their plane where they can get fuel and get set up. They see Have no sight. They have no sight of Bill Jr. or Dave. And they decide they got to get out there. And right when they're getting ready to take off, both the boys come riding over the crest of a hill on their Hondas just in time to see the Cessna take off.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
But thankfully, a federal soldier caught the two motorcyclists, our boys, and directed them towards a gas can where they hid some sandwiches for them. That was pretty cool. The stretch from El Arco to San Ignacio proved to be like one of the most challenging stretches because of the volcanic rock and the debris in the roads, debris in the pathways, I should say, that made it almost impossible for them to like achieve a good like cruising speed of 50 or 40 through the dirt. They were constantly going over obstacles, trying to keep the bikes balanced, navigate between rocks, dumping the bike, getting back on the bike, riding, dumping the bike, getting back on the bike. Visible rocks can be managed, hidden ones cannot, and the silt did a very good job of hiding them. Finally, they did reach the San Ignacio airport.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Where they were greeted with another care package waiting for them. More cheese sandwiches. Alright, they proceed south. The path then turns into two narrow sandy trails across the Pacific coast, and they take them. There's stones and stuff in there, and they're still dodging obstacles. The sand's soft, the sun's going down, eventually it's dark out, and then the warm desert air brings in a coastal fog, and things get thick. They get so thick they can't see shit in front of their own face. They can't see the stars, they can't navigate. Their headlight beams illuminate what they see as tracks in the sand ahead of them. And they find out, oh shit, that's our tracks. We've been going in circles. We need to stop, right? Straight out of Blair Witch Project. Stop going in circles. Wait for the sun to rise. We don't know where we are. At that same time, Bill and Walt Sr., who were in the plane, Bill Sr. and Walt Fulton, those two, are hanging out, waiting at their next rendezvous point. They've made a campfire too, not just waiting for the sun to rise, but also waiting for their friends who did not show because of that thick fog. All right, so dawn breaks. Bill Sr. and Walt take to the skies again, looking for their riders. That thick fog has not gone away. They can't see shit. And after flying around circles for 30 minutes, looking from above down to the ground, they decide to land. They land where they think presumably the path is, and they're trying to find the tire tracks and stuff. They can't find any tire tracks. Well, it turns out also where they landed was super soft sand. That's probably why they can't even see the tire tracks to begin with. The slightest breeze just covers it, and they almost get their plane stuck. But by pure luck, they manage to free it. They take off again and continue to their next meeting point of La Purísima, south. So our two riders continue riding south, and they come across the small fishing village of La Purísima that only has 3 houses, some barking dogs, and a bunch of kids who are very excited to see them. They get some really shitty gasoline, about 2 gallons worth, gray, not tip-top stuff for their bikes, and they get 2 warm Cokes. So that's a win. That's the recharge they needed. They continue southbound with some stale gas that didn't really complement the performance of these CLs that they have been used to. At this time, Walt touches down his mud-splattered Cessna 180 at the La Purísima airstrip, arriving just half an hour ahead of the Hondas. This is the straightforward part of the journey. They just have 80 miles ahead to Constitucion, where they can refuel, grab some food before they tackle the last 130 miles of Mexican pavement. However, that thin Baja Sur tarmac / pavement was notorious for potholes and guaranteed no safety when riding. They're relieved. They think the toughest part of their journey is behind them. Once they get up to 70 miles an hour though, Bill's bike starts spewing black smoke, and Dave can see this. Turns out when they removed that fender, all that debris and stuff messed up the air filter, ended up getting debris inside the engine, jacked up the motor. Now he's limping on 1 cylinder the last stretch of the journey. Dave was laser focused on completing the mission with Bill. These guys, even though they didn't know each other 2 days ago, are now tight. They have been on this journey for 48 hours. They're hermanos. All right, so now Bill and Dave have spotted the Cessna, and Walt and Bill Sr. waiting for them on the airstrip. They decide to book it. They pin out their throttles, and as they are ripping down the asphalt, Dave sees the back of Bill's bike start to spew black smoke, right? Things are not looking good. Something is up. Turns out way earlier in this story when I had mentioned that little crash. Oh goddamn! I had a lot of beans for lunch. When they had the little crash with the wire and they both slid out, and then they decided like, hey, let's just remove the rear fender altogether. Well, that when I say they, I mean Walt didn't agree with this, but some other people in the group decided, hey, let's remove the fender. And Walt's like, I don't know, it's not a good idea. Well, it turns out it wasn't a good idea. Fenders are there to protect your bike from shit like rocks and dust and debris and glass and I don't know, anything you would. It's a fender, all right? So removing the fender, exposed the perforated air filter, and then eventually they had cylinder lost, right? They were down a cylinder because they got debris in the engine. That's why it's spewing black smoke. But Bill and Dave are hermanos at this point. They've been riding together 2 days despite not knowing each other prior, and they got to see this thing through. So Dave is like boosting Bill. He's like, nah, brother, we're gonna get you there. And he puts his boot on the dead exhaust pipe that's, you know, that not kicking out any exhaust. Starts boosting him. He's like, I'm gonna push you the last 130 miles the entire way. And then Bill's like, nah, man, nah, you go ahead, man. I'll meet you there. I'm gonna limp along. I don't need your brother. Go on without me. And he does. All right, so Dave books it. Did switch to his reserve near the outskirts of La Paz. He used his last gallon that was stored inside the bag. There was a little bit of panic when he couldn't find the telegraph office, but he made it 4 minutes shy of 40 hours. Bill Jr. finished 1.5 hours later on one cylinder, closely followed by his pops chasing him down in a La Paz-based taxi.
The aftermath.
So did this whole stunt pay off for American Honda Motor Company? You're damn right it did. Between 1962 and 1968, they sold over 89,000 CL-type motorcycles. 2 major races have been held in Baja every year since 1967. What originally started off as Nora and then became Score, all strongly inspired by these 2 pioneers who went on to pave a path, who actually, a few years later, who did this same journey on Triumph motorcycles. I hope you liked the video. This has been Gas Can Productions. Get out there, ride your dirt bike, learn something, share your story. Like, subscribe.
I established the record of 39 hours, 54 minutes. When I got in the telegraph office, sent a telegram. I was very tired. I couldn't get off the motorcycle. My hands and legs and arms and whatever were pretty well seized. A once-in-a-lifetime experience. And what Ed Perlman turned it into was just incredible. He started off-road racing down there. Would I change anything? No. If you'd change anything, it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the original thing that we did.